Professor Dinesh Singh sir is also a recipient of Padma SHRI, one of the India's highest civilization award by President of India in recognition of distinguished services in the field of literature and education in the year 2014. As a former Vice Chancellor, University of Delhi, and distinguished professor, Solani University Solan also served as professor of mathematics. Sir also held honorary professor IIT Delhi and adjunct professor University of Houston and distinguished academic consultant Middlesex University, London. Sir also received honorary doctorate from various universities, University of Edinburgh, University of Houston, Texas, National University of Ireland, National Institute of Technology, Kurukshetra. Sir also received various recognitions. Some of them are Distinguished Senior Fellow, Member, Scientific Advisory Committee to Union Government, Cabinet Government of India, Member Jnanpith Award Jury, President Ramanujan Mathematical Society, and also held various leadership positions as a member and chairman of various committees. Also received his graduation and post-graduation in mathematics from St. Stephen College, University of Delhi, MPhil Mathematics, University of Delhi, DIC, and PhD from Imperial College of Science, Technology, and Medicine, London. The area of specialization includes mathematical, functional analysis, harmonic analysis, operations, functions theory. As a thinker, policy maker, implementer, Sir served on the board of trustees of the Association of Commonwealth University and also played a very significant role in serving ways in the shaping and directed growth of education in India. As a Vice Chancellor, there are many notable paradigm shifts and innovation achievements. Number one, ranking of Delhi University successfully transited to semester system, created and implemented the fourth-year undergraduate program, created and the Cluster Innovation Center. Sir also co-edited and co-authored many books and published more than 40 research papers. With this note, I would like to invite Padma SHRI Professor Dinesh Singh sir to deliver his keynote address. Sir.
Thank you very much. I deeply appreciate your kind words, and I am not sure if I'm worthy of such accolades, but thank you very much. And it's a delight to be present at this distinguished gathering today of those who serve India's cause for pursuit of knowledge. That is the way I imagine librarians and libraries. And I chose this topic with a certain purpose in mind. The business of reimagining a library, particularly in the context of the COVID crisis. As all of us know, the crisis has more or less overwhelmed the whole world, and many libraries are shut in the usual form of physical interaction. I checked several libraries across the globe, and I found that many of their services are curtailed. Yet, when I looked at things that I needed for my own particular work, my research in mathematics, whether it came to books, whether it came to looking at research papers, whether it came to connecting with journals, I've had no difficulty. And there is a message hidden there for all of us. And I think this crisis has allowed us to step back a little bit and then look at the whole situation with a proper perspective. जब किसी चीज के बहुत करीब होते हैं कि गहराई, उसकी समस्याएं, उसका स्वरूप आसानी से समझ में नहीं आता है, थोड़ा दूरी रखते हैं, थोड़ा पीछे हटते हैं, थोड़ा detached होते हैं, and then we get a better perspective. And I think this is a good time for us to look at this perspective, take advantage of this perspective by stepping back a little bit. So let me step back even in history. First of all of us know what really is a library. And the word is derived from the Latin word libro, which means a book. And so a library essentially is a collection of books. But I mean, a library is much more than just a collection of books, as all of us know. And there has been a great tradition of libraries across the world, and maybe we can learn some lessons from there. And I don't want to dwell too much on history, but I want to use those lessons to allow us to reimagine the library of the future, of the coming years. I'm sure we are all aware of the famous library at Alexandria. It had enormous collection. There are all kinds of estimates for the library at Alexandria. Varies, the estimate numbers vary from 40,000 to 400,000. Scrolls, manuscripts, things like that. What people do not seem to take cognizance of was that it wasn't just a collection of manuscripts and scrolls where scholars came to take advantage of these things. There was a deeper purpose. The library at Alexandria was a meeting place for people to generate ideas, to give ideas, and to take ideas. That, I think, is the great defining purpose of the library at Alexandria. That is something we must forever keep in mind, no matter what image, no matter what definition, no matter what perception we have of a library. This business of a place that engenders ideas, that allows people to be enriched. And if you will allow me, even this, that it should allow a human being to discover himself or herself. And you know, books play an enormous role. Let's just look at India, the ethos that we have today, the traditions and heritage that India has acquired from centuries past, centuries before the time of the Christ. Where does this ethos come from? Essentially, it comes from a virtual library. And there was no internet in those days, so what do I mean by that? Well, let's just look at this collection of books that have helped shape India's destiny. I speak of the 4 Vedas, I speak of the Upanishads, I speak of the Bhagavad Gita, I speak of all the Samhitas that went around the circle, that encircled this collection of books. I speak of all the Brahmins that went around, these new books that went around these books. That is nothing but a library. And look at the way this library functioned for India. This was our source book. Even today, when we talk of something and someone makes an assertion, people say he's talking as if this is a Veda Vakya, as if this is given in the Vedas. They were our reference points. Over centuries, they guided India's destiny. And they moved step by step from the Vedas. That's the inner core. That you could call that the nucleus. Then come the Upanishads that circle this. They're all derived or dependent or inspired or sourced from things that center around the Vedas. The Bhagavad Gita is essentially in that tradition. And then you have the Samhitas and the Brahmanas. All of these collectively were first in the oral tradition. And look at the magic behind that. If today I have, say, a first edition of a book by some author, say a mathematics author, then the same book will permeate the entire knowledge system of the world. It will say, this book by such and such an author, first edition, year so and so. Nothing changes. Just look at India's tradition. The Rig Veda, all the way from the north, beyond Kashmir, till all the way to the south up to Kerala, undiluted and unadulterated, has survived over centuries, over millennia. I mean, there is something to be said about this virtual library system. I also call it really a part of the first tradition of MOOCs in the world. Massive open online courses. As I said, there was nothing online then, but this was the oral tradition transmitting. Why did that happen? The moot point is, why did that happen? What allowed this to happen when traditions in other countries have actually fallen apart and they do not have much to fall back upon? Today, even in today's context, and let's look at the life of Mahatma Gandhi. All through his life, he says that I have relied on the Bhagavad Gita to guide me. And I'm not saying this from a point of view of religion. Don't get me wrong. It's just a great book of practical self-enhancement. It's a great guidebook. And Gandhi gives it the status of a mother. The book that he has written is called Gita Mata. He calls it mother. And this book has guided not just Mahatma Gandhi, but it has guided people over centuries. That kind of firm, conviction-based pillar of support for any society is hard to find in the world. That is the role that books have played in India's tradition. Somewhere we need to realize this when we reimagine a library for the future, to be able to create a source of knowledge systems like those in the past that permeate the being of every single individual in this land, who then relies upon these things to grow his inner self, to find himself for self-discovery. Let me also say, to my mind, whether it is a library of the 21st century or the 22nd century or of the past, if it is not a place of self-discovery, then there is no purpose to it. And what do I mean by self-discovery? Let me just give you one example from mathematics. You know, Ramanujan essentially became Ramanujan because of just one book. When he was in Kumbakonam, where he was born, and he was a schoolboy, he was in his early teens, I think 12 years, maybe 13, maybe. He came across a book, a single book, Carr's Synopsis of Mathematics. It's not even a book of knowledge. In today's parlance, it is really what is called a tuition center book. All it contained was a bunch of formulae, one after the other, without proofs, without applications, but statements. But even this one single book was enough to catch Ramanujan's imagination. And it set his mind on fire, and he became Ramanujan. That is what I mean. He discovered himself. स्वधर्म पहचान लिया. अंतर आत्मा की जो पुकार है, जिसको मैं अंतर्ध्वनि कहता हूं, रामानुजन ने अपनी अंतर्ध्वनि इस पुस्तक के माध्यम से पकड़ ली. That is the purpose of books, and that is the purpose of a library, no matter which age we talk about. It must allow individuals to discover themselves. And I want to tell you something about this journey. You know, the Indian written word, so people talk very much about the oral tradition in India. What is the Indian written word? When did we start writing? There are all kinds of estimates, certainly before the time of the Christ. I mean, the Indus Valley civilization that also has a script, but it's a different matter that they have not deciphered it. But I have to tell you something interesting. Again, this knowledge comes to me from a library in Edinburgh. When I was visiting Edinburgh, when they were awarding me this honorary doctorate, they knew my interest in ancient Indian history, and they gifted me a book. That book is 200 years old. It was written by the then Vice Chancellor 200 years ago of the University of Edinburgh. He was a distinguished historian. His name was Robertson. And the book is essentially on ancient India based on Greek and Latin sources. However, there's something interesting there. There's one chapter in the book which is on a manuscript in Sanskrit that Robertson has come across. Now, this is 200 years ago, he's writing. And this is a manuscript in Sanskrit. What is this manuscript about? It's a written manuscript. What is this manuscript about? It is a reading of the night sky in the Carnatic region. And it is a reading on astronomy. Because Robertson is a historian, he engages the services of the mathematician, professor of mathematics at Edinburgh. Together, they decipher the manuscript. Now, here's something interesting that I want you to take cognizance of. First of all, they established that when the manuscript says we made a reading of the night sky on this particular date, it is actually that date. You can mathematically prove that. So it is actually made on the date that they say they have made the reading. And what is that date? 5,000 years ago. Just think about this. That reading of the night sky was made 5,000 years ago. More interestingly, Robertson writes that the mathematics that they used for the reading is a very sophisticated mathematics. I'm sure all of us, when we go through high school, and if you have had anything to do with mathematics, must have studied trigonometry. Incidentally, even trigonometry was invented in India, but that's a different story or some other time. What I'm trying to tell you is the trigonometry that we do in school is all two-dimensional. It's on a flat surface. They are talking of spherical trigonometry, three-dimensional trigonometry along three axes to be able to study heavenly bodies. That's a very sophisticated mathematics. The point that we can learn from here is that that mathematics was prevalent in India about 5,000 years ago. Now, I'm also familiar with the kind of mathematics that grew around the Rig-Veda. It's very good, very important, very interesting, but it's much more elementary when compared to spherical trigonometry. From the mathematics that you have at the time of the Rig-Veda to reach the sophistication of spherical trigonometry, to my mind, it will take you several hundred years, maybe even 1,000. And therefore, a rough estimate to my mind of the date of the Rig-Veda about 6,000 years ago. Now, here's something interesting. So the library tradition in India, remember the Rig-Veda, the other Vedas, and the collection of books that I just mentioned is a library tradition. That library tradition has shaped India from about 6,000 years ago. This is something worth noting. And books that have helped shape India beyond that have one way or the other relied on the traditions, the intellectual thought, the openness of mind of those traditions. I particularly like this stanza from the Rig-Veda, this richa, Ano Bhadra Kritavo Yantu Vishwata. Let noble thoughts come to us from every direction. That must be the ethos of a library, whether it is of the past or of the future. So when we reimagine a library, when we wish to redesign a library, when we wish to make it useful to allow individuals, particularly young minds, to discover themselves, then we must keep this stanza of the Rig-Veda written boldly at the entrance of the library. Let noble thoughts come to us from every direction. A library must be a source of noble thoughts. The challenge is, how do we accomplish that? That is the biggest challenge. I honestly have no prescriptions. So if you're expecting that I will give you a clear-cut pathway, I don't have anything like that. I'm far, far removed from being an expert on library systems, but I'm certainly a user of libraries. I'm certainly a well-wisher of libraries. I'm certainly someone who realizes the importance of library systems. And more importantly, I realize the value of a librarian. The librarian is the pivot of a university's knowledge system. The librarian is the pivot, and I stand by this statement. If you have a good librarian, the university knowledge systems will flourish like anything. If a librarian does not live up to this challenge, the university suffers. So the sooner institutions, societies, and nations recognize that the librarian must be given the space and place of dignity and honor that he or she deserves, the better for that nation. And talking of librarians, I'm sure all of us are very much in awe of the great librarian Ranganathan. What many may not know is that he had mathematical training. And more importantly, I discovered that he has written a biography of Srinivas Ramanujan because he knew Ramanujan personally. So look at the multifaceted personality of Ranganathan. That is a true librarian, someone who works in so many directions, who realizes that knowledge knows no boundaries or barriers. It does not respect the tyranny of geography. That is what an enlightened librarian is all about. And I have many stories like that. You know, you will have to forgive me for some personal references. My father was a student of mathematics at Allahabad University. And he was a good student, very gifted. And he took his first doctorate from Allahabad University before he went abroad to Paris. When he was working for his PhD at Allahabad University, he needed a particular research journal. And it wasn't available in the library of Allahabad University, even though it was a great university with a very profound collection of books in its library. That journal was not available. It was an American journal known as the Duke Mathematics Journal. It is available in the University of Delhi library system, by the way. And then someone told my father that that journal is available in the public library of Allahabad. When my father told me this story, I was astounded. I was astounded. So the librarian of the public library of Allahabad understood the value of the journal. And somewhere he must have realized that the university is unable to afford that journal. And so he subscribed to that journal in the public library of Allahabad. And it was a godsend for my father because his entire thesis is based on research papers that come out of that journal. And that librarian was so enlightened that he saw that my father was a very hardworking student. There was no photocopying in those days. You had to just copy by hand. And there were many articles. So he told my father that you can take this collection of journals home. I know you will keep them safe and you can bring them back. That is also a facet of a librarian who facilitates, who recognizes earnestness, who recognizes the desire of someone to gain knowledge, to improve one's inner well-being. That is what a librarian is all about. And unless we have that in our librarians, our libraries will not do well. There are other things that have played a role in my life. And I remember when I was in school, I really enjoyed sitting in a library. When you think of a library of the future, you don't have to really think of the person sitting physically inside something. What I mean is, when I said I liked sitting inside the library, yes, the environment around the library made a difference. But the real difference was that I had access to the kind of books that I loved to acquaint myself with. That is so important. So we must make sure when we think of a library that we want to reimagine, it must be a place of joy, of fulfillment, even a certain degree of equanimity of mind, also something that excites the mind. I remember in my school library, I discovered this entire collection of novels around Sherlock Holmes, the 4 novels that Conan Doyle wrote and the other short stories. I also discovered the joys of the Encyclopedia Britannica in those days. I remember I used to constantly refer to that because that was a very powerful source book for that time. It may have lost its relevance today, but it was a great source book for that time. There were all kinds of other books, all kinds of books on history. I remember I read about the Crimean War at that time from a book in the library. I also read about Martin Luther King from that library. I also read great books on mathematics, all kinds of things. And I remembered that the library was a place that gave me enormous happiness. I loved sitting there. We must keep this in mind. When I moved to college, there was a new dimension that came to my life. I realized that the library was a great source, not of all the things that I found in the school and more. But more importantly, I realized that the library is a great place of social interaction in my college. I remember in those days, it was, even though it was a reasonable sized library, it was impossible to find a place to sit. It isn't that you sat and you gossiped with someone, but people would sit next to each other and speak in low tones and have books in front of them. You know, this business of engaging with oneself through common books, through common sources of knowledge, that was so powerfully manifested in my college library. And it continued when I moved to my postgraduate system at Delhi University. It continued over there. I realized how much the library system was playing a role in my life. Something changed drastically when I went abroad for my doctoral degree. Again, I realized that the library was the way I expected it. But the way to access material was far, far more effective. There were far more efficient systems. Something like that is now happening again. And people have understood this even in the COVID crisis, but much before that in India, we understood this, that to be able to access systems electronically has become far better for us, far more effective, far more powerful, far more useful. And this is something we must keep in mind, and I'll tell you what I have in mind, why we must do this. So let me tell you, I think for the last at least 15 to 18 years, I have never referred to a hard copy of a research journal in a library, not here, not abroad. I spend a fair amount of time in universities abroad for my research, and I have not looked at a hard copy of a journal. Everything that I need, I can access electronically. Sitting here right now, even last night, I had to access a couple of research papers available to me in the United States in a repository, and I went through the electronic process. I have access to systems there, and I could access those research papers. I haven't really used a hard copy. That is a huge change. Why do I say that we need to pay attention to this? Let me just switch gears a little bit. You know, when I was thinking about this talk, when Professor D.V. Singh asked me to give such a talk, I thought I have been to many villages in India. I've been to villages in Gujarat many years ago, so I cannot tell you what the situation is now in Gujarat. But when I was a schoolboy, I've been to many villages in Gujarat. I've been to villages in Haryana. I have been to villages in Jharkhand, Bihar. I've been to villages in Uttar Pradesh and even Madhya Pradesh. I have not found a single village, and this doesn't mean that what I'm going to say is true, but I have not found a single village that has a library, a sort of public library. To my mind, this has caused enormous harm to India, enormous harm. You will find, I found homes that have books. Some homes have a few more books, some homes have a few less, and many of them will have religious books. But books of the current world, books that will give you direction, books that will excite your mind, I just don't find them. They are not there. So, you know, this morning I decided to call up some people who are connected with villages in Uttar Pradesh. I called up 5 people for 5 different places in Uttar Pradesh, and I asked them, can you tell me if your village systems have any books even now? And all of them said no, those villages do not have books, no library system. India needs to think about this. You can say it is very difficult to equip every village with physical books. I don't believe that, but let's suppose that is. Now we have electronic access. So when we think of a library of the future, I honestly believe that we must make sure that every single village is connected in some critical fashion, to both kinds of works, both kinds of worlds. Physical books, which they can house in some kind of public library, and electronically available books. And if you can't connect it through the internet, what difference does it make? I think the government, I think even intellectuals, and most importantly, librarians must devise packages of electronically downloaded books that can be stored at central places with lots of computers available around them, so that individuals, and particularly women, I really mean this, particularly women, are allowed to access these books, and they will transform our rural countryside. I want books available over there. So when you reimagine a library of the future, on entrepreneurship. And remember, Gandhiji had many things to say about entrepreneurship. I have read one of his speeches where he's talking to a village audience. And he says, start the charkha, start spinning the charkha, start making cloth through that. And he says, I give you my word, industrialization will automatically follow in its wake. Because your mind grows, your ideas grow, your needs grow. And I remember this experiment at Gandhi Bhavan, where I started at the University of Delhi, where I had a charkha spinning program for students and others also, free. And a very good Gandhian lady used to come and teach them how to spin. They started spinning. First they used the takli, then the charkha, and then they began to make thread, and then they finally ended up making shawls. I am telling you, if we allow this to come back to our village systems, so what do we need to do? We need to give them books that give them ideas to do things like that, on entrepreneurship, on startups, on better agricultural practices. And they have to be, a library is not just a collection of the printed word. A library is a collection of all kinds of sources of knowledge. You can have audio visual, you can have all kinds of images, you can have cartoons, you can have comic books. YouTube by itself is a huge library. I checked in some of these village places where I called this morning, they are always able to use their smartphones to access the net. But I realized that there is no one there to tell them how they could empower themselves through these sources, which I call virtual libraries, that are available for free on the web. So I would urge us, when we imagine a library of the future, that there is nothing now like only one standalone physical library. That is important. It has to be there. It must have physical books. But unless library systems enhance their worldview, unless they grow out of that building and connect to the world in many ways, and here is what I'm trying to tell you. If at the University of Delhi, I am no longer in touch, and Professor D.V. Singh is no longer there, I know that if he had been there, this would have been done just like that. But suppose we decide that in the neighborhood of Delhi, village systems require knowledge and inputs of the following kind. The University of Delhi's library is a powerful source book. We could digitally scan so many books. We could also source books that are freely available on the net and create a whole system of knowledge which you could embed in village systems, which would be connected to us through the internet for a two-way exchange. That should be part of the idea of a library of the future, a reimagination of the library. I will tell you something else. I do not know what kind of data is available here in India, and because I'm not a librarian, so that is the reason, not that it is not kept. But I've been looking at data from other countries, both in the United States and in other countries in Europe. People who go inside library systems physically are of two kinds: undergraduates and those who come for specific purposes to print something. A large number of other people are accessing libraries more than they used to in the past, but in a virtual manner. All research scholars, when I started my research in England, I used to go to the library every day. I now know research scholars in the United States and in England who hardly go to a library because they access everything on the net. But the access of electronic books, the graph that I have been watching is going up rapidly. It's a fairly nice graph going upwards. The access of physical books is more or less declining a little bit. It's a good sign. We shouldn't really be a place, how many physical books can we altogether house? It's so difficult. This virtual is good. And I'm not saying we don't need physical books, so don't get me wrong. But I think libraries need to transform again with the spirit of Alexandria. They become a place, a meeting ground, where you have a collection of physical books. But more importantly, there must be much more space for all kinds of access electronically. And I've noticed this at the University of Houston, where I've held this adjunct professorship for 20 years. In 20 years, I've seen the library transform itself. At one time, the library was like the way we understand the library is traditionally. But now they've built more and more extra space, and they've removed more and more physical books. And what have they done with this additional space? By creating new space and by removing books, these are places where students come and sit. They drink coffee, they have their lunch, they talk to each other, and they access things electronically. Productivity, intellectual productivity, as I have understood, has gone up enormously. But in India, our needs are not entirely like what they are in the West. One of the great needs of a library in India is that students come from a sort of background where they have no place to sit, no books to access. They need physical space. They need a place where people will not trouble them, where they can focus on their needs. And a huge number of students in India sit for competitive exams. I don't grudge them that. Let them find their way. If this is the way they discover their own selves, let that be. But our library systems need to think about this. How do we make more and more space, physical space, accessible to our students, to our young who want to find their way in life? It is getting increasingly difficult because they're not there to gain knowledge in the tradition. Hardly, very few. Most of the time, they want to sit there and prepare for an exam. This is a challenge. I'm not saying preparing for an exam is bad, but we must need to think that is this the only thing a library must do, or should we create space in such a way that those who wish to prepare for exams can focus on that in different ways, and the library can become a center for all kinds of exchange of ideas. I would be happy if you could create a space where there is a cafe where you can serve coffee, tea, a little bit of snacks, and there is all kinds of electronic content available through various sources. And let that be a reading place, let that be a discussion place. I think libraries of the future must also have lecture rooms, they must have seminar rooms. And, I have always wondered, a good librarian keeps track of what are the trends of knowledge around us. And he keeps informing. I mean, I'm aware of how I have been informed by my librarian, who is sitting in this audience here today, with what was happening in the world around me. That is something that a library does through the librarian. So, you need to keep track of things. Electronically, it is so much easier. And, libraries need to be quick on their feet. A library of the future must think so quickly on their feet. We house every single reasonable library in India as a good collection of very rare books. On the other hand, if you look at Google Books, their collection right now, when the books that they have scanned, I think has touched more than 3 million books. You would know the exact figure. I don't know the exact figure. More than 3 million books. That's a huge resource base. Libraries of the future must enter into negotiations with Google and other such agencies and say, we will allow you to scan our rare books and put them up for your use. In return, we must have free access to many parts of your collection. Let me give you an illustration. There is at the Vikram University, Ujjain, there is a library that holds, it's a special library, that holds ancient manuscripts. I have been to that library. Hardly anyone goes there. I asked the librarian, and he said, hardly anyone comes here. You won't believe the kind of rare manuscripts that book has, that library has. They haven't yet been scanned by the National Manuscripts Mission here at the Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, not yet. And even when they get scanned, they don't become publicly available as far as I know. Maybe I could be wrong. The important thing is, I cannot understand why Vikram University, Ujjain has not entered into negotiations with Google so that Google could scan these manuscripts, put them on their sources, and allow Vikram University students to access a huge part of the 3 million books that they have. I think libraries of the future need to do that. And in India, the more we get connected through electronic sources, the better we will be for the future. I want libraries. I looked at two public libraries in Delhi, the Delhi Public Library. Its website is horrible. It's badly designed, but there are some very good things happening there. So last night, I just wanted to test something. So they have a search place right at the top of the website. And I typed over there Mahatma Gandhi Experiments with Truth. And you will be surprised. You will be surprised. They gave me all the places in all the libraries in Delhi that are of the government which have copies of that book. I was very happy to hear that. I was very happy to see that. I also went to the website of the Dayal Singh Public Library. That's also a great library, but these are libraries more of the past. They must think better, more effectively for libraries of the future. It is important for them to think along those lines, how they could create more space, allow more electronic access, and bring in the public. Particularly, why does not the Dayal Singh Library connect to the villages around Delhi? And why just Delhi? They could connect to any village in India. Have they thought like that? That is something that a library of the future must really think about. But there are all kinds of sources. Libraries of the future need to think about that more and more. One more piece of data that I found, in the United Kingdom, and I think this is also true of the USA, more women access public libraries than men, which is what, it doesn't surprise me. I think there is much more to being a woman than there is to being a man. I think they are the pivots of change for the better in society. Remember what Gandhiji used to say: you educate a woman and you educate a whole family, you educate a whole environment around her. You educate a man, he really only becomes a one man with a career in mind. A woman is not like that. And this is an encouraging sign. I don't know if, as librarians, you have data on this, whether the usage of public and institutional libraries is done more by women, but I believe that would be true in India also. I'm very sure of that. So this is a healthy sign. That is why I said a library of the future must create small pockets of virtual libraries in village systems where women have access. This is so important for us. Also, a library must become a place not just for virtual ideas, not just for intellectual ideas, but the physical verification of ideas. Every library should have as an adjunct to it an engineering kitchen. A kitchen, that means a place where the young can go, they can access things electronically and through hard copies, and then try out some experiments, some ideas, anything in that engineering kitchen. A platform that allows you to test things. A library by itself has to be a university. A university is nothing without a library, but a library is a university whether there is anything else around it or not. That's something we must understand. A library is a university by itself. And we must make it more and more active as a university. Let us not worry about what happens in an institutional sense around us, but enliven a library system, make it more open. And in that context, a library of the future, when we reimagine, we must bring in good architectural and design principles. There are many great experiments happening in many parts of the world where architectural design and architectural rethinking and design experiments are happening around libraries, both institutional and public libraries. I don't see much of that happening in India. I think we need to bring that, and for that, librarians have to play a central role. I know it is not easy being a librarian anywhere in the world. People look upon librarians as the people who have to deliver no matter what happens, get us this, get us that. But librarians are the, as I said, pivots of knowledge systems, and they will have to play this role. We need to bring in that kind of design principles over here, particularly in our village systems. And I'm running an interesting experiment. So, because I'm chancellor at K.R. Mangalam University, even though it's just an honorary position, but they give me a fair amount of freedom to do things. Chancellor has no powers there really, and it's a purely honorary position. But because I have some good connections there, we are actually connected with villages around the university. And we are into this experiment of looking at what are the smart things that happen in a village. And remember this, we haven't gone there to adopt the village. That's patronizing. We have gone there in humility to learn from the village systems and also allow them to learn from us. So it's a two-way process of equality. And one of the themes that on which we are focusing is how we could create a hub of intellectual and physical activity centered around a library system. And in that context, we are also building what is a smart ashram on the campus of the university. What is the smart ashram? Again, what are we thinking about? The principle that drives us in the concept of the smart ashram is that if Gandhiji had been alive today, what kind of ashram would he have created in today's context? And all of us are agreed. We have architects, we have other people, many of us from different disciplines working out the design. All of us are agreed that we need to have access to knowledge, and therefore we have created space. It's still in the process of being designed and then to be executed, but central to the ashram is a place where knowledge has allowed to come and go freely. And we are hoping that this model will then also be reproduced in other parts of our village systems, where they can take and give knowledge through a kind of mechanism that uses electronics to the core. So I urge all of us who are here today to think about this. Remember that libraries are always been central. I have always held, and Professor D.V. Singh is someone who agrees with me, that the decline that happened in the intellectual knowledge traditions of India, then the economic traditions, started to happen when libraries such as those at Nalanda were destroyed. I think it made a huge difference to India that such knowledge systems were completely destroyed. So we can understand that libraries play a major role. And I, once again, want to tell you that a library should become a social pivot also. When this Great Depression happened in the United States, I'm talking of the 20s and 30s, there's one state, Kentucky, which was really backward. The state of the rural areas of Kentucky in those times is worse than what we have in our rural areas today. It was pretty bad. Enormous poverty, great deprivation, no jobs, and hardly any institutions. And then when Franklin Roosevelt launched the New Deal, this is government intervention to get the economy going. And he distributed state money, state funds, like we are right now talking of this huge largesse of a fund that will go into the country to stimulate the economy. He did that in the 20s, 30s. Using those funds, the state of Kentucky, for its rural areas, created libraries on horseback. So they got librarians from city areas, men and women, who were then, and this system lasted for a fair amount of time. It lasted for, I think, 6 or 7 years. All of them, early morning, would sit on their horses, would collect a bunch of books and go into rural places. And those places hardly had any schools, let alone libraries. Like I told you, our villages don't seem to have libraries now. And I was so happy to learn that it made a huge difference to the economic and intellectual outlook of rural Kentucky. Women particularly took to those books like anything. They would wait for these librarians to arrive. And the librarians would be there on the rounds from morning till late evening, both in the summers and the winters. There was hardly any roads. There were no roads. That's why they had to go on horseback. But that was a marvelous experiment. It was a kind of village library. They would bring books and take away books, bring new books and take away books and give them to some other village, and they kept circulating them. It is a great study. It should be a great sociological study, the impact of books of rural small libraries in rural areas and what kind of difference they make. There are other roles that libraries play. You know, when this earthquake happened in 2011 in Japan and there was a tsunami and the atomic reactor also was badly affected, people were very disturbed in Japan. One of the good things that Japan did was it opened up its libraries, even though many libraries were damaged. But when they looked at those libraries that were not so badly damaged and were not in danger of collapsing, they opened the libraries up. And it had a huge calming effect on the population. People began to start spending time in the libraries. You know, libraries have a calming effect on the mind. It allows कुछ अंदर जो होती है वो थोड़ा घट जाती है. There is a calming effect, both physically and even virtually. When I start accessing things virtually online, and I do that all the time, and I find a good source, whether it's a book, whether it's a research paper, whether it's a lecture on YouTube, it absorbs your mind. It allows you to focus on that and you forget the others. Ekagra buddhi se, to the exclusion of everything else. A library is such a place. And when they did that in Japan, it made a huge difference to the population. I think libraries of the future, no matter when, which age, they must always keep such well-being in mind. So, you know, I have essentially said what I had to say. My last statement is, I am not saying that the physical library must go, but the physical library and the electronic library must work in close synergy. And physical space is important, but the space occupied by books physically must begin to reduce, and there should be greater space for young minds to sit, exchange ideas, to discuss, to learn, to see things, to experiment also. A library should be more a place of knowledge in action. I think if we keep that principle in mind, we will have much to think about when we wish to reimagine or redesign the library of the future. Well, essentially, that's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your thought-provoking aspects in relation to reimagining libraries in the era of digital learning and redesign libraries from library as a place to library as a platform, so that we'll be able to combat with the emerging situations like today's we are stuck in. Thank you, sir, for explaining the tradition and future of libraries and your passion, your love, and your fondness towards book, libraries, and librarians. I hope many will get inspired by your detailed talk about connection between library and literature. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, I would like to request the President of Indian Library Association to please deliver his address. Dr. B.D. Kumbar.
The most respected, the Padma SHRI, Professor DINESH Singhji, the Chancellor, the K.R. MANGALAM University, the former Vice Chancellor of Delhi University. Sir, the ILA is always thankful to you for your advice, and I hope you are going to continue your advice to our ILA as well as the library and information science professionals even in future also. Your lecture, it was not in the form of the lecture, it was in a kind of advice. As a senior library scientist, advising to the junior library and information science professionals, that is about what to do and what not to do, that is in the future. So especially you have covered that is about the village libraries. So I too also 100% I am going to agree with you. The country like India, it is in need of the village libraries. So even till today, the more than 65% of the population in India, they are living that is in the rural areas. We need to establish the public libraries. Say for example, that is in Karnataka. We have taken the public libraries that is to the Gram Panchayat level. Each and every village is not having the public library, but 2 to 3 villages together. So we have started the Gram Panchayat library, which is providing the minimum information that is about the government, especially the central as well as the state government programs. And again, it is creating a lot of information and awareness that is in the minds of the public of rural India. So to quote F.W. Lancaster, a British American information scientist, the libraries and the future. So in the essays of the libraries and the future, he observes that as we enter the 21st century, significant change will occur in the way in which sources of information, inspiration, entertainment will be made available, and these changes will have major impact on the library and the library profession. Sir, as you said, the major changes, they are going to take place. There is no doubt about it. But only the thing is, the country like India, it has to support our academic library system, research library system, especially the public library system. So when the nation is going to support, then only whatever the ideas you have been shared with us, we will be in a position to implement, and we can bring all the changes that is in our libraries. Look at the present academic as well as the research libraries. They are changing at present. They are becoming themselves as a network hub of the scholarly knowledge, the scholarly materials, which requires not only the physical, the presence, but at the same time, the digital one as well as the digital network also. But due to financial constraints, our academic libraries, they will be not in a position to change. Of course, as the UGC is suggesting, so instead of spending the whole money that is on the purchase of the printed books, so minimum 20 to 30% of the amount should be spent on the purchase of the electronic resources. So accordingly, at present, our university and college libraries, they are purchasing the print as well as the electronic resources, and they are trying their level best to provide the accessibility to electronic resources. Sir, as you know, the implement is being established to support all the university as well as the college libraries in India. Especially, the implement is subscribing more than 4 to 5,000 e-journals and providing an access. But at the same time, each and every college and the university librarians, they are going to be trained properly, that is in providing an easy access to the resources that are readily available at the headquarter of the Ahmedabad. And again, it is the responsibility that is on the part of the library and information science professionals to find out the right resources, especially that is in the sea of knowledge. This is one of the challenging aspect of the library and information science professionals. So when the library and information science professionals, they are going to train the users. Say in 90s and 2000, we have started in the universities, training the research scholars, that is about how to use the e-resources. Of course, the present generation, it is not in need of such training, but however, we have to tell them, we have to advise them, we have to guide them what are the resources that are readily available, especially freely, that is in the university and college libraries. So finally, what I would like to say here, the change we have to introduce, that is in the library. The use of the ICT is must. We have to develop e-resources, provide the following services that is in a changed environment, especially as you have mentioned, that is about the future libraries. They have to provide the following important services to its clientele. The first one is the computer is must, that is in the library. Our librarians, they are started providing the computer-based services, information-based services, network-based services. The profit of the library, it is going to be measured. That is only on the basis of the services the libraries they are going to render and the satisfaction of the customer. Ultimately, the main aim or the goal of our library is the customer satisfaction. So, as you said, Ranganathan, being a father of library movement in India, so he was also a great mathematician. It was way back to 1924, the Vice Chancellor of the Madras University, he requested Dr. S.R. Ranganathan to take the charge of the library. He took the charge of the library and became very, very popular library scientist, not only in India, that is at the global level. So such type of the leaders are going to be produced, that is in the country like India. So again, I will mention that is in the conclusion, as our Honorable Prime Minister, he identified just 2 days back the 5 pillars that is for the self-reliance of India. So I will mention only the 4th and the 5th one. The 4th one is that is vibrant demography. So it is only possible for the libraries and the library and information science, the professionals to create and provide such type of the vibrant the demography, provided if they are going to be given a chance to serve such type of the population. Say for example, he has given more than 20 lakhs, that is to the people of India. But even the majority of the people who are living that is in the rural areas, they do not know how to make use of that particular money. So hence, as you have mentioned, that is about the ashram, the smart ashram. But here we can start the smart libraries that is in the rural areas. When we are going to start the smart libraries in the rural areas, these smart libraries, they are going to educate our farmers, for your information, just looking into the data of America and England, more and more number of the women, they are serving in the public libraries also. They are providing a lot of useful and important services that is to the women. In turn, the women, they are serving. So almost all types of the users in the country. So the similar thing we can expect that is in the country like India. So provided if the seniors, the educationists like you, if you are going to advise the government of India, so to start the libraries that is in the rural India. Of course, the Indian Library Association is very closely working with the Rajaram Library Foundation for the promotion of the libraries that is in the rural India. But whatever the amount the central government of India or the Ministry of Culture is providing, that is to the Rajaram Library Foundation, it is not sufficient for the promotion of the libraries that is in the rural India. So therefore, on behalf of the ILA, on behalf of the all library and information science fraternity in India, I request you, sir, sincerely to help us in overcoming the problem and enacting the public library legislation and starting the smart public libraries that is in rural India. With these few words, once again, I thank you, sir, for your scholarly and thought-provoking lecture providing to us. And again, I hope you are going to continue and you are going to advise the Indian Library Association that is even in the future also. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Anadar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor B.D. Kumbar, sir, for the introduction and putting forward the issues and challenges being faced by public libraries and other libraries in rural India. You have very well said that there is an urgent need to develop such kind of libraries so that more and more people could get benefit out of it. Sir, if you will permit me, can I take 1 or 2 questions?
Sure, sure.
Sir, there is a joint question by Professor Lakshman Rao and Rajesh Pandey. So I am taking it jointly because the intention of both the question is same. So in your opinion, how could we enhance the footfall in the library, as it has been observed that user, even faculty member, doesn't visit to library, rather users are dependent more on Google. And they further asked, do you think that providing more and more digital services would help user, and how could a common man across India have fulfill access to valuable resources?
Oh, so that's a very comprehensive question. But you know, I've very often thought about how we could get young people, particularly, to come and spend more time inside the library. And you know, I have some off the cuff ideas. I haven't tried them out, but maybe they're worth thinking. You know, we could have themes. So suppose I have a theme on how do you sort of generate electrical power without, how do you generate, how do you make ice without electrical power? And I have, say, a number of source books in the library. And we give some broad hints and we create a game, a competition, and we get young students to come in teams. And we give them a whole day. And they should have access to computers and printers and, you know, such things. But we also give them a bunch of hints or clues that these are the sources with these keywords, with this kind of classification that are available in our library around. Go find them, and into this problem can be found through them. And you will be surprised, because I've done this thing not in a library system, but in my home when my children were small. And they would look, and I would give them some clues on what is available in the number of books. Of course, I cannot have the books that are available in a library, but there were all kinds of children's books and some other books. And I would give some clues and I would say, you'll find your answer, your solution to the problem that I posed. And I give them some hints here, here, or there. And they would spend 3-4 hours in their summer break and would eventually make a presentation with the solution. It has multi-purpose. That's when you begin to discover the joy of and the value of the books that exist in your library. And if you do this repeatedly, regularly, and also create space where they can sit and discuss. So this physical space for young minds to sit and talk, and even allow them to have some coffee, some light snacks, that is very important. You start doing that, your footfalls will increase.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So if you'll permit, I'll take only one more question. Sir, many participants has said, thank you, sir, for being here with us in this platform and giving your valuable lecture on the topic. But one participant wants to ask Anil Kumar Jain, what should be the next step for the libraries? What should be the next step for the libraries? How do they address?
You know, as Dr. Kumbar just said, that funding is becoming difficult. I think libraries should step out to the public, and public will support us only if we show that we can create value for the public. So libraries should become, I mean, maybe libraries should somehow work out some schemes, some programs that can show the public. For instance, suppose, this is too late now in the day, but suppose we knew that there will be a corona crisis. I think libraries should play the role of a repository of all the knowledge that is being generated right now in the context of the corona crisis as a source platform. Intelligent people within the library system, and every library has people who love books, great librarians. I've come across some really great librarians in my life, and they can easily create a platform. And from there, they can source things that, look, this is what is happening. This is nothing to worry about. Here is this article that tells you this. You curate everything, and on a daily basis, and the public will see value in your library. And the public sees value, then it will begin to be ready to support you. And to make a public profile, a greater public access, it'll at least help you alleviate some of the funding trouble. Also, this virtual network is a great source. I just mentioned Google Books, but there are so many sources. You know, the Gutenberg project, I think they have more than 100,000 volumes already online, freely available. I think somehow we should have activities that allow people to access special things, create competitions, create learning programs, create certification programs. What prevents a library making a proposal to the university that we will offer certificates as so-and-so has derived this knowledge using our physical books and our online resources. And you start certifying, and more people will use. And if you create these programs and you make it available to the public at large, They would love to have a university certification. Everyone loves some certification which has a university stamp on it. And more funds will start coming in. Also, you know, the OCLC, the Ohio College Library Center, that is a huge connection of libraries across the world. I don't know how many, I'm sure all of you are connected to that. But that's a huge resource. You know, I have tried that Ohio thing, just as an experiment. I love doing these things. You know, you type Mahatma Gandhi autobiography, and they will tell you which is the nearest library where you can access it. I mean, they're a marvelous thing. And somehow we should bring all this to the attention of the public at large. And I think things will improve. I think they will improve.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. So now it's time for concluding remarks and vote of thanks. I take the privilege to conclude this session. Friends, our honorable guest, Professor Dinesh Singh, sir, has rightly mentioned that there is a high crisis period has posed various challenges and question mark before academia and libraries. One of the major changes we were expecting to see in academic libraries is the use of new innovative technologies. Library need to redesign, reimage in a new avatars and stay relevant. That is most important. With this note, I would like to request our Dr. Owen Chaubeji, General Secretary ILA, to deliver a vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, all of you. It is my proud privilege to propose vote of thanks on the occasion of 4th program of ILA Webinar Series during lockdown period. On behalf of Indian Library Association and on behalf of all LIS fraternity and on my own behalf, first and foremost, I would like to express my profound gratitude to the chief guest and keynote speaker of the day, learned Professor Dr. Dinesh Singh, Padma Shri awardee, former Vice Chancellor of University of Delhi and presently Chancellor of KR Mangalam University, for accepting our invitation and grace the occasion. Thank you, sir, for your very interesting and thought-provoking lecture. I believe participants of this webinar have very much benefited. Sir, your presence makes this webinar meaningful. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I
Thank
really
you, sir.
enjoyed this. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I am very thankful to Professor B.D. Kumbhar, President of Indian Library Association, who has always encouraged and given us hand to conduct ILA webinar series. Thank you, sir. I also express my special thanks to Dr. D.V. Singh, former Chief Librarian and University of Delhi and ex-President of ILA. Thank you, sir, for your guidance and support. I express my hearty thanks to Dr. Priya Rai, convener of ILA webinar series, for her regular support. Thank you, Dr. Priya ji. I also express my deep sense of appreciation to Dr. Pradeep Rai, Senior Vice President of ILA, for his welcome address and support. I would like to place on record my sincere thanks to coordinator of this organizing team, Dr. Akash Singh, Dr. Arjun, Dr. Sonam Singh, and Shivji Prasad for their hard work. Thanks are also due to all senior LIS professionals who have joined this webinar, like Professor Lakshman Rao from Hyderabad, Dr. Abdul Majid Baba from Srinagar, Dr. R.K. Sharma for joining this webinar. Thank you all LIS professionals, senior LIS professionals. Last but not least, Indian Library Association is very grateful to all the participants who has joined through Zoom app, live, Facebook, and YouTube from across the country. Thank you. Thanks to all. One announcement: on 16th May, this Saturday at 4 p.m. in collaboration with Haryana Library Association, ILA is going to organize another webinar. Thanks to one and all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Host to please end the session.
Dr.
I
Arjun.
request all to please leave.
Thank you.